Hey everybody, I'm live with longtime friend and soon-to-be Zenny 62 media advisory board member, if he accepts. I think he is. Davey D. But Davey, under the circumstances, uh, what's going on, man? Because we had this Hangman Noose controversy, and we were at the lake and saw what happened. Fill us in, please.
Yeah, can you hear me clear, or am I on?
Loud and clear. Loud and clear. Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, kids. Hey, Saluna. Kids. Hold on one second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Hey. Yeah. Thank you. So this morning, what we had was a situation where I got a text from some good friends that were jogging by the lake, and they sent me a series of pictures and said, hey, there was an effigy here at Lake Merritt, down over by Wayne Avenue, not too far from Brooklyn, maybe about a block or so over. And said, the police are here, come on down. So I rolled on over. And when I got there might have been about 7 or 8 police officers from OPD. And this effigy was on the ground. I rolled over to go take a picture and was blocked, and walked back and said, hey, you have to step back. This is, we need to, make sure the scene is secure or something like that. And as I stepped back, they immediately put the effigy in a bag. So I couldn't get the clear picture. So the only pictures we have are the ones that Tina and Marcy took. We, obviously, this is disturbing considering everything that's going on in California. We have 2 hangings that have almost been removed from the news headlines locally because we had the nooses around the lake, which are now being attributed to somebody just leaving them out after doing some exercise. And we have this. There was a response to it yesterday with the nooses. Somebody, a bunch of people went down to the lake, painted the tree red, black, and green. And then there was a community response to patrol the lake. So there were community folks that have been patrolling the lakes 24/7. And where we're at on this right now is the timeline, because on Wayne Avenue, the question is, how did you hang an effigy from the tree and nobody see it? That's a pretty busy corridor. And who saw it at what time? How did the cops get there? How long have they been there? And everybody I'm talking to, that was at the lake and had been there, including vendors and what have you, said by the time they got there, the cops were there, and they saw an effigy on the ground. So that's raising a lot of questions. And then when we're talking to the community patrol, they have a particular timeline, which I'm not going to reveal until we get all the information. But their timeline seems to raise even more questions as to how this happened and when. And so we're waiting to hear, or at least find out, who made a call, or whether the patrol officers, because they said that extra police officers were going around the lake. Was it on the ground? Was it hanging from a tree? These are all the things that we're waiting to hear from, and want to match that with what people have told us. And that's where we're at on it. The whole idea of an effigy or nooses is disturbing because of the climate that's going on in this country. Not only did we have the 2 hangings that were initially ruled as suicide happening within days of each other in California alone, they're now being criminally investigated. But we had 3 other hangings around the country. One was a Latino man in Houston, one was in New York, and one was in, I want to say, a part of Georgia, if I'm correct. I may have the cities wrong, but we had somebody in Florida. So we've had these disturbing things. We also had a noose that was found in New York as well. This is on top of other stories that have been buried, including the shooting of an activist on Facebook Live, of all places, in New Mexico. And so this was captured on camera, and it was people that were part of a militia who were supposedly they were agitating the protesters who were there to take down a statue of Ornette, who was like a brutal colonizer. And these folks, when you listen to the radio dispatch, are referred to by the Albuquerque Police Department as what do they call armed friendlies? That's the word that they use, armed friendlies. So you got all this stuff going on around the country. We're not even talking about police walking off in Atlanta and the heightened discussions around defund and not to defund, AstroTurf rallies for the police now, Napa and other places that are suddenly being, they're trying to equate those rallies with the thousands that have been coming out, not just here in this country, but around the world. Yes, sir.
FYI, the Atlanta police walking off was turned out to be a false report. The mayor came out and cleaned that up pretty quick.
Yeah, we would question the mayor's thing. That's what she said, but that's not what actually happened. And I'm going to go with the folks that are on the ground that I talked to that that are going to actually be on our show this afternoon. That not only did they break the story, but they're pretty well versed and know a lot of the officers that actually did what the mayor did. And to give it some context, just so you know, the mayor's on the short list to be vice president of the United States. And if she does get that position, she could be really the next president if because we don't know if Biden, if he wins, would serve 2 terms. So there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. And that was actually talked about by the folks in Atlanta. So, there was a sick out. Definitely was that. And if the mayor's saying that, mayors don't always tell the truth before the camera,
Speaking so we're gonna have something else to share. The mayor, I don't know if you saw the mayor's press conference, the mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaaf's press conference, but she didn't mention she mentioned, of course, that there were several nooses around the lake. But is it a case of perhaps OPD withholding information from her, or what are your thoughts?
No. When the nooses came out, that was pretty widespread. We sat on that. We knew about it for 24 hours because the nooses were discovered or known, I want to say, what is it? What's today? Thursday. So it had to be like Tuesday night or Tuesday morning. And the question was raised, why is nobody saying anything? People immediately wanted to go out and say something. And the conversation that was had was, well, why is the mayor not saying anything? Because God forbid if it was any other thing that was going on, in our opinion, she would have been out there. If you know what I mean, she would have been press conference and everything. And I think at this point in time, she has a responsibility, whether we agree with her or not, to make sure that people in the city feel safe. And to be proactive, and you give them the same amount of treatment that you would give anybody else. And in this case, somebody's taking claim and saying, hey, these were just jungle gym props or whatever. That should have been cleared up almost immediately. Hey, we found some nooses. They were jungle gym props, but you know what? Considering that we just had somebody kill a federal officer in the city of Oakland, right? And initially, if you go back, they tried to attribute that killing to protesters. They were like, oh, it must be Antifa, or it must have been the rowdy folks that want to break windows and anarchists, right? No, it was a white supremacist, right? And many people thought that immediately when it happened because, as organized or as angry as people have been and are, I doubt if they were going to take that bold step and go kill a cop. That's you just don't really have it happen like that. And I just didn't see why you would do that. And a black cop like that, considering that he was pretty well known with a lot of people in the community. So this was kind of like a friendly guy, it's like, man, he's not even on OPD. So why him? So, of course, a couple of weeks later, we find out when this thing goes down in Santa Cruz that's the same white van that everybody saw. And not only was this guy connected to a militia, he's an active military guy, right? That was rolling with another person whose goal was to start a race war. And so just that fact alone would have said to me that there would be conversations publicly made to say that we're going to ensure the safety and the well-being of citizens in this city. And that didn't happen until Ryan Nicole, well-known artist, did a Instagram and a Twitter and a Facebook post going, Libby, where are you? Do we need to have a cross burning before you say anything? Others raised the issue that they should say something. The community, of course, is going to respond because that is immediate self-interest. And they did. They set up community patrols, and everybody knows not to go out by themselves. But a noose is troublesome to just about everybody I can think of, and it's triggering. Just like when we went by the lake, there was a young lady that was crying. She had broken down, and she was crying over the effigy and was asking, why does she have to see this in her city? What the hell is going on? And, and that pain people felt, which led to other people crying, right, by the lake, like, why are we dealing with this? So I think
people late to 74, and I can remember the nooses. And what bothers me, Davey, is that we don't have an ordinance that specifically prohibits the manufacture and making of a hangman noose. And that's what bothers me. We have it all. It happens a lot. We had the city issue, right? And we could have done it then. We didn't. And yet here we go again. And I've said to a number of council members privately, this has got to be the last stand for this crap. Put an ordinance out there and make it stick. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I think above and beyond that, you have a response. Look, all this stuff that we're dealing with right now would not have happened if three things took place. Cops who did people wrong were simply punished and fired and removed. It's that simple. Just like if I'm teaching a class and I decide to get up one day and punch a student in the face because I just feel like it, guess what? Not only am I expelled from the teaching institution I'm at, I'm probably not going to be able to teach again, right? If I'm doing my journalism job and I'm working for somebody, even if I'm working for myself, and I decide to say, hey, this person is, killed a bunch of cats and it led to them, getting adverse mail and threats and everything, I would be sued. The organization that I'm working for would be sued for libel, and I wouldn't be allowed to work, and I would literally be ostracized from my profession. But you have cops that are right here that have got promoted, who have been connected to the human trafficking scandal and the rape scandal with Celeste Guap. You have cops who have left one department, went to San Francisco, killed somebody, and went back to the same department, which is why you had a protest last night in Antioch and those other cities. And you had, George Floyd, being killed by Derek Chauvin, who sat on this man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Who had
cop that was doing some sort of murder for hire, and yet he was an OPD employee.
Yeah, we had that. But I'm saying, here's a guy with 18 complaints. You have another guy who had 6 complaints, including lawsuits, right? We in the city of Oakland have $74 million in settlement money going out because of brutality issues, as we're sitting here talking about which teachers get to keep their job and which teachers need to be cut. Why don't we have enough counselors for kids who, need help? Why don't we have all the things that we say we need to have because of a very simple thing? The so-called bad apples, if you believe in that theory, right, have not been fired and have not been removed from their profession, which would make it clear for those who want to do right, which means since you can't get rid of the bad apples, it means that what we have is a systemic problem. And the systemic problem has led to protests all around the world, which easily could have been avoided if, you took care of those two things, and more immediately, if you had just arrested that fool that killed George Floyd immediately. Like, hey, man, you murdered him. You're arrested, and the other 4 are going. Just imagine if they had done that. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. We might be talking about, sports, what's happening with the Raiders, will Kaepernick come? We would have been talking about 15 other things, but we wouldn't be talking about that. But people have been so invested in particular ideologies that, in my opinion, are rooted in anti-Blackness, that are rooted in anti-immigrant, that are rooted into just hatred for particular classes of people, that here we are at this moment, with, political turmoil and upheaval. So anything that happens, whether it's innocent like these nooses, if they were really just jungle gym props, or this effigy, which I don't think was any jungle gym prop at all, is not only triggering, it's beyond upsetting. Now you have a whole other set of problems on your hand. If the woman that was crying by the lake is any indication, now you really have pissed off, people that didn't need to be pissed off.
Right. You have a psyche. Like, I sat there at the kitchen when I was waiting, and I just found tears just coming up, and I couldn't help it, because I never thought my city would be the focus of this. And yet, as I was saying to one of the council members, this kind of behavior has been escalating since 2014. And we, with gentrification, with tightening of the manufacturing base, a lot of economic reasons, a lot of social reasons, people have not been properly educated regarding American history or their place in it, and go on and on and on, and let alone just decency. Okay.
And there's been some validation of things that are unconscionable. Like, you have that landlord that not even from here, who moved here, became a property owner, and was putting up the Trump signs, trying to get an elder out of his house, with harassing the homeless people, offering them $2,000 to leave. I mean, just stuff that you would just be like, really? And, and instead of immediately saying, this is not our city, this is not what we stand for, it's kind of allowed to fester. Yeah. And I said this before, I said, there was going to be policy recommendations about protests before there were going to be policy recommendations about problematic cops, which we saw to be the case. Mm-hmm. There was going to be people having to push and shame city officials to speak out about nooses, and speak out, not just condemn, but to assure people that, hey, your safety is our priority. That didn't come naturally. That had to be a push. And that was the whole point. Like, hey, man, let's see if this mayor going to say something. You're not going to say anything. This is all up on Facebook. You don't have staff members that don't follow, like, community folks on your page to be like, hey, this is what they're talking about. That in itself was problematic. That, like, there should have been an immediate phone call. Hey, can you give me some information? What can we do? Let's stand together. Let's make this happen. No, it had to be a call out. And I think that is problematic.
We have never institutionalized diversity. We talk about it all the time, but it's not written into the city charter. And if it were, racial diversity, economic diversity, we would have to have affordable housing. We'd have to have a fund that was maintained regardless of change. All of that would be instituted in it, and yet it's not there to this day. And we need to have a change where that language is there, where it's implicit.
Absolutely. So this is where we're at this moment, and who knows what tomorrow will bring. Every day there's something different that's going on, and there's so much happening that we haven't even talked about what's going on in Minneapolis. Right. We haven't been able to follow up fully as to what's going on in Louisville, Kentucky, with the Brianna thing. We're just barely able to keep up with, what's going on when they say there's an increase in COVID-19, right? Where's those increases coming from? Mm-hmm. It's a lot of Black and brown and poor communities in these states, because there's so much going on. And I think, rather than make the necessary personnel change and cultural change that is being asked, people are digging in, which means that we're going down a road that I don't think we should have to go down. It's pretty simple. You do wrong, especially when you serve the public, then you shouldn't be there serving the public. But people have locked in and want to stay in this position, and I don't see it ending anytime soon.
Why does this seem to me, I'm just going to throw this out there, why does this seem like this is happening right at the time that the president, who's known for dividing society, is running for re-election, and these instances just happen to be the perfect tool to do just that, divide society. Your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a number of things. One, he's going to play to a base. And anti-blackness in this country is a solid, dependable base. If you don't understand history, you'll think that what this president is doing is somehow unique. But, even him going to Tulsa is not a unique move. Ronald Reagan did this when he went to Philadelphia, Mississippi, which was the site of the killing of the 3 civil rights workers 20 some odd years prior to him showing up in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Cheney and I can never remember the names, but to kick off his presidential campaign in 1980, or at that time, was 79 or whatever, was to go to Philadelphia, Mississippi, which was to send a signal like, I don't care about these people. I don't care about the history of this city. We're going to appeal to you guys, and you guys tend to have as a fundamental part of your DNA racism and anti-blackness. And if we go up through the years, we find that there's been a number of people that have played that card, whether it was the election against Michael Dukakis with George W. Bush and the Willie Horton situation, whether it was Bill Clinton and his sister soldier moment, because it's not unique to, unfortunately, the far right. The Dems do that a lot too, whether it was using black folks and poor folks as fodder with welfare reform and anti-immigration legislation. All this stuff is rooted, is the DNA that says we can get a certain amount of people if we play this card. And so this current president is like, hey, man, the more I turn up, the more I'm going to get people excited. And even if they're not excited, I'll cause mayhem. And in the mayhem, maybe I'll survive, because that's that's his comfort zone. So he has militias that are waiting to be deputized. He has folks who feel disenfranchised, who are poor, who have been actually betrayed, but the anger around their betrayal has been directed at me, like I did something, versus the very people who they're actually rallying around, who betrayed them with tax cuts and unfair distribution of resources. So this is a historic moment that we're going to be looking at 10, 20, 30 years from now. I hope people take it in, learn some lessons, and move on. But it's going to be it's going to get ugly pretty soon.
This is the real $6 million man right here. We'll come back. You got it, definitely. Hey, thanks for the time. Stick around in the back room, folks. Subscribe to Zenny62, but more important, just be careful out there. Okay, this is a scary time. If you can stay indoors and enjoy great food and accompany your family, do so.
Well, let me just say something. Be intentional about building your community. This is the time for you to check in with people. This is your time to, call up, and be friends with folks. Oh, you walking around the lake? Do you need me to walk around the lake with you? What time are you coming home? Do you need me to pick you up? Those types of things. Why? Because there are folks that now are at the precipice of being pushed over the cliff. And it ain't us. It's those that are holding on to an ideology that it's on its way out the door, right? There's going to be a shift. And those people that have this as a fundamental makeup, hatred of others, their time is almost up, but they're going to kick and scream before, before they're finally tossed over. I would liken it to this. Goliath was for a long time impenetrable, seemed like he could be not defeated. And David had 5 smooth stones. He only used one. He hit Goliath, but Goliath was swailing. He was stomping his feet. He couldn't believe he was hit. And what we're dealing with is that these folks got hit with that stone, and we're seeing them, flail their arms, stomp their feet, try to regain their balance, and maybe, use that rage. And I'm saying hit them again with another stone. So our job is to turn up. And turning up means that we got to be intentional about building bridges, loving each other, looking out for each other, supporting each other, protecting each other. That's the best thing that we can do, and have our success be the dagger that puts these people to rest once and for all.
Well said. Davey, stick around. Hey, everybody, thanks a lot. And we'll be back later talking NFL.
Thank you.